Hey there and welcome. In this video, I'm going to tell you exactly what I did to conceive my first baby very quickly, within 2 months specifically. To give you some very quick background, I am 35 years old, which is considered advanced maternal age, and my husband and I really only started talking about trying for a baby this year, early this year, January specifically. I went for my annual well woman visit with my doctor in February. We started trying actively in March, and we conceived in April of this year, very quickly. And even though we were somewhat casual about conceiving, like I didn't use all the tools and all the different things that people do, we were somewhat deliberate about it. And we did use a couple of tactics that I'm about to share with you in this video. So if you're not familiar with some of these tools and tactics that I'm about to share, keep watching. If this is your first time here, my name is Nancy DaCosta. This is my first time being pregnant. I am 35 years old. I'm currently 12 weeks and 2 days pregnant as of this recording. I've never been pregnant before. I've never done this before. I'm just trying to figure it out. And I'm sharing with you what I'm doing and what has helped me in the hopes that if you're trying to conceive or if you're trying to have a baby, that this helps you conceive and have a baby more quickly. If you're interested in hearing more about my pregnancy journey, then hit that subscribe button below, subscribe to my channel, and hit the little notification bell so that you get notified when I publish videos. I plan to publish videos and document my pregnancy and motherhood as I go. Consider us to be very lucky because we know and have known a number of people who have had trouble conceiving, who haven't conceived straight away. Sometimes it's taken months, sometimes it's taken a couple of years. My husband and I were actually thinking it might take us a while to conceive because we had never tried this before. And I have to tell you, for me specifically, in my case, it was actually very quick. And while we're grateful that it was very quick, I also acknowledge that it wasn't a complete and total accident. We were very deliberate about it, and I'm about to share with you what we did and what tools and products we specifically used to conceive as quickly as we did. Now, I've got to warn you as well, I'm going to be going into very explicit detail of how we conceived. So to give you some background, I already mentioned that my husband and I were discussing starting to try for a baby early this year. Specifically, I want to say January, we started having this conversation, and at the end of February, I went for my annual well woman visit with my midwife, and I told her that we were going to start trying for a baby this year. And this was just a couple of weeks before my 35th birthday, and like I said before, I've known a number of women who have had a hard time conceiving. Sometimes it's taken them longer, sometimes it's taken a couple of years, sometimes they've had fertility treatments, and I just didn't know where I stood. Like I said, we had never tried for a baby before. I had never even suspected ever in my life at any point that I had been pregnant before, so I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know what specific action to take besides obviously having sex around ovulation. So I was casually discussing with her the idea of trying for a baby, and she very casually brought up the idea of using a menstrual cup to keep all of my husband's semen inside of me so it wouldn't just all leak out when we were trying for a baby. And I'm a total nerd. I love hacks like this. I've been using a menstrual cup just every month for my period for the last 4 years. So I already had a menstrual cup and it wasn't new to me. And I had never thought of this idea personally until she mentioned it to me. And I thought, that is such a brilliant idea. I even told a couple of my friends that we were probably going to start trying for a baby. And I even told them about this hack myself, even if they didn't ask me, just because I loved it so much. So I'm going to explain more about exactly how we did it at the end of this video. So when I had that appointment, I just so happened to be ovulating during that time and my husband was out of town. So February of this year was out for trying. And I should also add that my midwife also advised me to start taking prenatal vitamins a couple of months before trying, or even as we were trying, just to get the amount of vitamins up in my body. And unfortunately, I actually didn't do this because, like I said, I didn't think we were going to conceive so quickly and so easily. And so I actually didn't even buy prenatal vitamins until 3 days before I had a positive pregnancy test in May. So one thing I would recommend for you to do is to start taking prenatal vitamins. So these are actually the prenatal vitamins that I'm taking now. They're VitaFusion prenatal vitamins. I'll flash them on the screen. And you can get them at Costco. They're actual gummies. They're fruity gummies. They're very yummy. I personally find it very hard to take pills and vitamins that are large or that they're not very easy to swallow. These gummies are very easy to take. I recommend them. They're working for me just fine. But of course, not a doctor, so ask your doctor what prenatal vitamins they recommend. Just make sure you have at least 400 micrograms or milligrams of folic acid. That's the one thing you really need to have in a prenatal vitamin. Anyhow, she also told me that because of my age, if my husband and I were actively trying for 6 months and nothing was working, then they would investigate further. So after that appointment, I started paying very close attention to my ovulation and menstrual cycle. I've actually been tracking my period for years, not for fertility reasons, but for me to remember when I should expect to get my period. And I've been doing this ever since my early 20s. And as a woman, it's actually a very good habit to get into because your period, or the frequency or the lack of your period, if you ever miss your period, tells you a lot about what's going on inside your body, besides the possibility of pregnancy. And in the last year or so, I switched to using an app on my phone called Flow. And there are many fertility apps out there. I just so happen to use this one. And every month I would log into Flow. I'd log my first day of my period. I'd log my symptoms. I'd log PMS symptoms that I usually have. I'd also log days of making love. And what this fertility tracker does, and what all fertility trackers do, is that it aggregates your data and tells you what your predicted day of ovulation is, based on the information that you provide. And this is a critical day. It's a critical piece of information that you need to pay attention to if you are actively trying for a baby. My periods had always been fairly regular. I usually have about a 29-day cycle, give or take a couple of days on some months, but usually 28, 29 days is my cycle on the money. So based on the information that I had been providing to the app over the last year or so, I had a very good idea of what days of the month that I am most fertile. And if this is the first time you're becoming familiar with it, every woman, every month actually has a window of fertility, a window of opportunity where you're most fertile in the days before ovulation and ovulation day. After you ovulate, after a day or so after ovulation, the chances of getting pregnant are way lower. So it's very important to pay attention to your ovulation window. And another physical sign that you're going to ovulate or you're about to ovulate is your discharge actually changes around that time of month. Usually they describe it as an egg white-like discharge. The way I notice when I'm about to ovulate is when I go to the bathroom and I'm peeing and I wipe myself, if I feel a little bit slick down there or it feels very slick, I know that's my body getting ready to ovulate, or it's about to enter that window of ovulation. So that's another symptom that you can pay attention to. And I know that there are ovulation tests, just like there are pregnancy tests. I never had to use an ovulation test. If I had been trying longer, I probably would have, but I personally didn't use one. And that was because I was using the other tool, Flow, that I already talked about. If you have a 28-day cycle, you usually ovulate roughly 2 weeks after the first day of your last period. So the first month my husband and I started actively trying was in March. And even in March, we were actually somewhat casual about it. I knew when my fertile window was, and I just thought, let's just try a couple of times in this time period, even though I'm ovulating in a couple of days or I'm ovulating on so-and-so day, and see what happens. And in that very first month, we actually did not get pregnant, which is totally fine. So our next chance to get pregnant was in April. I also have a friend who just had a baby last week, and I shared with her that my husband and I were trying for a baby. And she gave me the next tip that she had, and that was to make sure that you make love the day before you ovulate. And the theory behind that is some sperm get to the fallopian tube and get to the ovum very, very quickly, and others are a little bit laggards. So if they get in there and they're waiting in the fallopian tubes, when you ovulate, one of them should be ready to go and attack that egg. And we wound up conceiving that time. Here's exactly how we did it. I knew that my expected day of ovulation was on April 27th of this year, which was a Saturday. So that Friday night, my husband and I very deliberately got busy. When my husband and I make love, we usually use lubricant because a lot of times my body just doesn't produce enough and it makes sex, especially the first couple of minutes, very uncomfortable. So need the lubricant. And I've heard that some lubricants actually kill sperm, which is not what you want to do. But I can tell you that, first of all, we didn't even know that some lubricants kill sperm. And secondly, this is the lubricant that we used the night that we conceived. It's Isabel Faye natural water-based lubricant. I'll flash it on the screen. I'm not recommending it. I've done no research about it. I don't know how it works with fertility and whatnot, or if they recommend you use it or you don't. But I can say that I used it the night that I conceived and it didn't hurt anything. And I also had my menstrual cup nearby. And if you've never seen one before, this is what it looks like. Normally to use when you have your period, but an excellent tool when you're trying to get pregnant. And I know that some people talk about using the menstrual cup and instead of your husband or your partner ejaculating into you, that he just ejaculates in the cup and then you put it in afterwards. I don't like that idea. I have a theory, it's a personal, untested theory, that a man's penis is kind of like a launching pad for his sperm, and it should be as high up in your vagina, as close to your cervix as possible, so that the sperm don't have to swim all the way up the vagina, that they can just get into the cervix and get a head start. So anyway, we made love and my husband ejaculated. And before we made love, I made it very, very clear that I wanted him to ejaculate and be as deep in me as possible, which he did. So after he ejaculated, and this step is super critical, you gotta make sure you've got your menstrual cup nearby within arm's reach. After my husband pulled out, I grabbed my menstrual cup. Before I even moved an inch, I didn't want any of his sperm to leak out of me. I grabbed my menstrual cup and I put it in like I normally do whenever I have my period. And what's also nice about using a menstrual cup when you're trying to get pregnant is that you just don't leak everywhere like you normally do. I have actually been at times feeling like I just wet my pants because all of his semen just leaked out. Using a menstrual cup actually prevents that from happening. Needless to say, nothing leaked out. And I wound up leaving the menstrual cup in until the following afternoon, which is probably a little bit too long to leave it in, but I just thought the best thing that we could possibly do is just give it some time, as much time as possible. And when I pulled my menstrual cup out that day, it was very empty. There wasn't much in there. And I thought, okay, success. This might actually work. It could work. So anyway, what then happened, I actually didn't feel any different until the week before I was supposed to get my next period, if my period was going to come. And me personally, I tend to get PMS symptoms like the day before I get my period. I get depressed before I get my period, and then I get my period, and then I feel normal. That's what usually happens. I specifically remember this week. There was a day where I felt sad, but it was a week before I was supposed to get my period, not the day of. And I also noticed, again, a couple of days before I would have gotten my period under normal circumstances, was that I was feeling slight cramping several days before my expected period date. And what was different about these cramps, this could be because this was the second month of trying. What was different about these cramps, they didn't actually feel like menstrual cramps. They felt slightly different. I don't know how to describe them. They were more of an ache. Normally, my normal menstrual cramps are very painful and I usually take a leave for them, but these cramps, they didn't feel quite the same, and they subsided, I think, after about a day, give or take. And I was also admittedly very anxious this week because this was the first time I thought like, oh, this is different. I may be pregnant, but I don't know yet. And you're not supposed to technically take your pregnancy test unless you've been late 7 days, which is usually 7 days after your last period. But the day I was supposed to get my period, which was Mother's Day, I went to Target and I bought First Response. And First Response, it's supposed to be accurate up to 6 days before your missed period. And I was gonna wait the 7 days. I honestly was gonna wait the 7 days. But what happened the following morning, I woke up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, lots of stuff on my mind. I was feeling that anxiety and I wasn't gonna fall back asleep until I had a pregnancy test. And I figured the box, which was probably about $12, had 3 pregnancy sticks in there. So I thought, well, if it's a negative, I could just take one again next week if I don't get my period. So went to the bathroom, took the stick out, and it's actually a good thing I did it first thing in the morning because your urine is actually most concentrated in the morning. I didn't actually think about it at that time. It was more a functional, anxious decision, if you will. So I peed on the stick and I saw a faint pink line on the stick. And I got back into our bedroom. My husband was awake and I was just like, babe, it's positive. And he was in shock, honestly, because first of all, he thought it was gonna take a long time to get pregnant. Like even his parents, his mother specifically, had told him that for several years they were trying for a baby and they didn't have him, who Harold is actually their first baby, until after 5 years of trying for a baby. So he was convinced probably gonna take longer. And he was just like, wow, really? And I was like, yeah, look, it's a pink line. It's a pink line. It's a faint pink line. And basically what happened was, well, it was a bit surreal the first couple of days, but then I didn't get my period, and I have not gotten my period, and I'm now 12 weeks pregnant. And I'm gonna talk about my first trimester and my experience with my first trimester in another video. But anyhow, that's how I conceived within 2 months of trying. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out a lot. It helps people find this video, and subscribe to my channel. I plan to publish more videos about my pregnancy and motherhood in the months ahead. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.